Lift every voice and sing, till earth and heaven ring, ring with the harmonies of liberty. Let our rejoicing rise, high as the listening skies. Let it resound, loud as the rolling sea. Sing a song full of the faith that the dark past has taught us. Sing a song full of the hope that the present has brought us. Facing the rising sun of our new day begun, let us march on till victory is won.
Greetings, everyone. On behalf of the Black History Month Committee, we welcome you to the 2021 Cultural Celebration, where we have adopted the national theme, the Black Family, Representation, Identity, and Diversity. Preparing for our presentation this evening, please remember, for our Fitchburg State community members using the live stream link, your participation will be limited. For our guests, we ask that you use the Google Meets link option and stand by until admitted into the room. If you know of someone who is having issues with logging on, you may direct them to the Black History Month webpage where they will find additional login information. If you would like to ask a question during Q&A, you may unmute your audio, type your question in the chat box, or utilize the Q&A submission form found on the Black History Month website also. We ask that at this time for you to mute your audio. Finally, this presentation is being recorded to support sharing this engagement beyond today. Without further ado, I would like to introduce our speaker for this evening. Karl Bell is the Associate Director for TRIO Student Support Services at Boston College. He has served in higher education for over 25 years in multiple roles, from admissions to academic advising, and from new student orientation to multicultural affairs and student activities. Karl is a third-year PhD student in the higher education program at the University of Massachusetts, Boston. He is the author of Education 101, Thoughts on Teaching and Race, in James Earl Davis and M. Christopher Brown's Black Sons to Mothers, Compliments, Critiques, and Challenges for Cultural Workers in Education. His research interests centered on the socialization of Black doctoral students and the effects of racism on educational outcomes. His professional interest includes developing partnerships between academic and student affairs and the creation of institutional support for Black males, low-income students, and first-generation students. He is the co-chair-elect of NASPA Student Affairs, partnering with Academic Affairs Knowledge Community, and his most recent book chapter, co-authored with his doctoral advisor, Supporting Doctoral Students Amid COVID-19 Health Crisis, will be released later this year. Karl is from the Show Me State of Missouri and believes firmly in the idea that action speaks louder than words, and faith without works is dead. So at this time, I would like to turn it over to Mr. Karl Bell.
Lift every voice and sing, till earth and heaven ring with the harmonies of liberty. Let our rejoicing rise high as the listening skies. Let it resound loud as the rolling sea. Sing a song full of the faith that the dark past has taught us. Sing a song full of the hope that the present has brought us. Facing the rising sun of our new day begun, let us march on till victory is won. Stony the road we trod, bitter the chastening rod, felt in the days when hope unborn had died. Yet, with a steady beat, have not our weary feet come to the place for which our fathers sighed? We have come over a way that with tears have been watered. We have come treading our path through the blood of the slaughtered, out from the gloomy past, till now we stand at last, where the white gleam of our bright star is cast. God of our weary years, God of our silent tears, Thou who hast brought us thus far on the way, Thou who hast by thy might led us into the light, keep us forever in the path, we pray, lest our feet stray from the places, our God, where we met thee, lest our hearts, drunk with the wine of the world, we forget thee. Shadowed beneath thy hand, may we forever stand true to our God, true to our native land. Good evening, Fitchburg State University. What a great honor it is to share this moment in time with you as we pause to celebrate the 45th official annual observance of Black History Month in the U.S. of America, and its 75th observance since Carter G. Woodson first proposed the celebration of Negro History Week on February 7, 1926. As the Negro National Anthem suggests, and as a favorite song of my church home in Kansas City, Missouri exclaims, God has brought us a long way, over high mountains and valleys so low. Don't you know he's never left us alone? Oh, glory be to God. He has brought us a mighty long way. And I've come here to tell you tonight, Fitchburg State, that the state of the Black Union is strong. Now, the state of the Black Union is strong, not just because Kamala Harris now serves as the first woman, the first Black, and the first Indian to ever hold the office of Vice President of the United States of America. Strong, not just because Raphael Warnock now serves as the first Black man to be elected to the Senate from the state of Georgia. Strong, not just because Barack Obama was elected and served 8 years as the first Black president of the United States of America. Strong, not just because Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, and George Floyd, even in their deaths, shined a bright, brilliant light on systemic racism in the US, a country that has for over 4 centuries sought to strip Blacks of both their dignity and humanity. The state of the Black Union is strong and growing stronger each day because of the Black family. In fact, dare I say that the only thing on this planet, in my not so humble opinion, that is stronger than the Black family is the Black mother. The Black mother has birthed generations of brilliant, intelligent, articulate, attentive, excellent, and beautiful Black people. The bonds that exist within, between, and across the Black family are stronger than any form of systemic racism could ever be. Stolen from the breast of Mother Africa by way of the transatlantic slave trade, Black women, girls, boys, and men have always displayed a strength that is deeply rooted in love of self, love of family, love of one another, love of melanin, and the love of the Creator who created us in her image. To put it succinctly, the Creator designed us that way, putting strength at the core of our DNA. The Creator knew that it would take strength in 1846, 80 years before Negro History Week was even established, for Dred Scott to sue for the freedom of his family from slavery in St. Louis, Missouri. It would take strength for Dred Scott to maintain his self-respect and dignity when the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court of the United States, as he tossed out Scott's case, argued that Negroes have for more than a century been regarded as beings of an inferior order and altogether unfit to even associate with the right race, either in social or political relations, and so far inferior that they had no rights which the white man was bound to respect, and that the Negro justly and lawfully be reduced to slavery for his own benefit. This ruling, and thousands of others like it since, have sought to weaken Blacks and the strength of the Black family, but to no avail. It took strength for the men of the 54th Massachusetts Infantry Regiment to fight a war and give their lives at a rate of pay that was 30% less than their fellow white soldiers. In fact, many gave their lives, knowing full well that the cause for which they were fighting would never value them, their lives, or their ultimate sacrifice. Whether in times of war or peace, Blacks have never been treated equitably under neither the laws nor the Constitution of this country. However, no matter the circumstance, reconciliation has always been our mantra. Our strength has always been unmistakable, and justice has always been our love language. Tonight, I want to introduce a few members of the Black family to highlight the strength and beauty of what I call something inside so strong. Ella Baker, Sandra Bland, Mike Brown, Addie Mae Collins, W.E.B. Du Bois, Eric Garner, Marcus Garvey, Fannie Lou Hamer, Carol Denise McNair, Garrett A. Morgan, Rosa Parks, Sidney Poitier, Richard Pryor, Carol Robertson, Betty Shabazz, Georgiana Rose Simpson, Alexander Lucius Twilight, Madam C.J. Walker, Cicely Tyson, Cynthia Wesley, Carter G. Woodson, Malcolm X. Without these pioneers, our ancestors, our foremothers, our forefathers, our great-great-grandparents, our aunts, our uncles, our cousins, our family, we would not be able to enjoy the privilege of being here this evening. Harriet Tubman, the architect, the designer, the engine, the fuel, the tracks, the conductor, and the mother of the Underground Railroad, reminds us that every great dream begins with a dreamer. Always remember, you have within you the strength, the patience, and the passion to reach for the stars and to change the world. What obstacles in your life have tested your strength and your patience? What barriers have blocked your path? Know and be assured that nothing, and certainly no one, can keep you from achieving all that you have ever imagined. The power is within you. You only need now to activate the dreamer also within. Nearly killed by her slave owners, Harriet Tubman refused to allow anything or anyone to kill her dream of freedom, and neither should you. In 1851, another ancestor, Sojourner Truth, announced the arrival of Black women in the public sphere. Well, children, there is so much racket, there must be something out of kilter. I think twixt the Negroes of the South and the women at the North, all talking about rights, the white men will be in a fix pretty soon. But what's all this here talking about? That man over there says women need to be helped into carriages and lifted over ditches and to have the best place everywhere. Ain't nobody never helps me into carriages or over mud puddles or give me any best place. And ain't I a woman? Look at me. Look at my arm. I have plowed and planted and gathered into barns, and no man could head me. And ain't I a woman? I could work as much and eat as much as a man if I could get it, and bear the lash as well. And ain't I a woman? I done born 13 children and seen most of them all sold off to slavery. And when I cried out my mother's grief, none but Jesus heard me. And ain't I a woman? Then they talk about this thing in the head. Well, what's that they call it? Yeah, that's it, honey. Intellect. What's that got to do with women's rights or Negroes' rights? If my cup won't hold but a pint and yours holds a quart, wouldn't you be mean not to let me have my half measure full? Then that little black man there, he says women can't have as much rights as men because Christ wasn't a woman. Well, where'd your Christ come from? Yeah, you. Where'd your Christ come from? From God and a woman. Man had nothing to do with him. If the first woman God ever made was strong enough to turn the world upside down all alone, then these women together ought to be able to turn it back and get it right side up again. And now they's asking to do it. The men better let them. Obliged, child, to you hearing me. And now old Sojourner ain't got nothing more to say. Here we witness Sojourner Truth, outlining the parameters of what it meant to be an independent woman long before Destiny's Child called on all the women who were independent to throw their hands up at them. Sojourner Truth is our auntie. She was duty bound to tell us the truth as her name dictated, no matter how much it hurt. The strength of the Black family is buoyed by our ability to speak truth to power and deeply rooted in our understanding that, as Frederick Douglass noted, power concedes nothing without a demand. It never has, and it never will. Douglass wasn't shy in his critique of U.S. traditions. He was a necessary voice of his time, and his words ring true even today. Fellow citizens, pardon me. Allow me to ask, why am I called upon to speak here today? What have I, or those I represent, to do with your national independence? Are the great principles of political freedom and of natural justice embodied in that Declaration of Independence extended to us? Would to God, both for your sakes and ours, that an affirmative answer could be truthfully returned to this question. But such is not the state of the case. I say it with a sad sense of the disparity between us. I am not included within the pale of this glorious anniversary. Your high independence only reveals the immeasurable distance between us. The blessings in which you this day rejoice are not enjoyed in common. The rich inheritance of justice, liberty, prosperity, and independence bequeathed by your fathers is shared by you, not by me. The sunlight that brought light and healing to you has brought stripes and death to me. This 4th of July is yours, not mine. The mother of the Civil Rights Movement, Coretta Scott King, the backbone of the movement, in a manner that only she could, taught us the true meaning of violence. I must remind you, she said, that starving a child is violence. Neglecting school children is violence. Punishing a mother and her family is violence. Discrimination against a working man is violence. Ghetto housing is violence. Contempt for poverty is violence. We must always remember and never forget the unmistakable violence that has been perpetrated against Black people and the Black family. We must also be able to see the everyday violence that manifests itself daily through benign neglect. This benign neglect in this country began centuries ago when blacks were stolen from the shores of Africa, stripped of their native tongue, and given the designation of nigger, a designation that lives to this day. James Baldwin called on us to challenge this designation through an understanding of its true meaning and origin. I know this, and everyone who has ever tried to live knows this. What you say about somebody else, anybody else, reveals you. What I think of you as being is dictated by my own necessities, my own psychology, my own fears and desires. I'm not describing you when I talk about you. I'm describing me. Now, here in this country, we've got something called the nigger. That doesn't, in such terms, exist in any other country in the world. We have invented the nigger. I didn't invent him. White people invented him. I've always known, I had to know by the time I was 17 years old, that what you were describing was not me. What you were afraid of was not me. It had to be something else. You invented it, so it had to be something you were afraid of. You invested me with it. Now, if that's so, no matter what you've done to me, I can say to you this, and I mean it. I know you can't do any more, and I've got nothing to lose. And I know, I've always known, and really always. That's part of the agony. I've always known that I am not a nigger. But if I am not the nigger, and if it is true that your invention reveals you, then who is the nigger? I am not the victim here. I know one thing from another. I know I was born, I'm going to suffer, and I'm going to die. The only way to get through life is to know the worst things about it. I know that a person is more important than anything else. Anything else. I've learned this because I had to learn it. But you still think, I gather, that the nigger is necessary. Well, he's unnecessary to me. So he must be necessary to you. So I give your problem back. You're the nigger, baby. It isn't me. Here, Baldwin underscores one of the greatest challenges facing the Black family: the inability to name themselves and to chart the course of their own destiny and success. The reliance of Blacks on systems that are designed to perpetuate and advance narratives of inferior status dooms us all to failure. This has been, and I fear it may forever be, the plight of Black people and the Black family in this country. As one of the greatest leaders this nation and perhaps world has ever seen told us, in spite of all of our struggle and in spite of all of our sacrifices, the colored peoples of America are still not free. 100 years later, the life of the colored American is still sadly crippled by the manacle of segregation and the chains of discrimination. 100 years later, the colored American lives on a lonely island of poverty in the midst of a vast ocean of material prosperity. 100 years later, the colored American is still languishing in the corners of American society and finds himself in exile in his own land. So we have come here today to dramatize a shameful condition. In a sense, we have come to our nation's capital to cash a check. When the architects of our great republic wrote the magnificent words of the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence, they were signing a promissory note to which every American was to fall heir. This note was a promise that all men, yes, Black men as well as white men, would be guaranteed to the inalienable rights of life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. It is obvious today that America has defaulted on this promissory note insofar as her citizens of color are concerned. Instead of honoring this sacred obligation, America has given its colored people a bad check, a check that has come back marked insufficient funds, but we refuse to believe that the Bank of Justice is bankrupt. We refuse to believe that there are insufficient funds in the great vaults of opportunity of this nation. We have come to cash this check, a check that will give us on demand the riches of freedom and the security of justice. We have come to this hallowed spot to remind America of the fierce urgency of now. This is not a time to engage in the luxury of cooling off or to take the tranquilizing drug of gradualism. Now is the time to make real the promise of democracy. Now is the time to rise from the dark and desolate value of segregation to the sunlit path of racial justice. Now is the time to lift our nation from the quicksands of racial injustice to the solid rock of brotherhood. Now is the time to make justice a reality to all of God's children. It would be fatal for the nation to overlook the urgency of this moment and to underestimate the determination of its colored citizens. This sweltering summer of the colored people's legitimate discontent will not pass until there's an invigorating autumn of freedom and equality. As we all witnessed recently with the attack by white nationalists and white supremacists on the United States Capitol, the sweltering summer of discontent and the invigorating autumn of freedom and equality are no more. It is winter in America. And when America catches a cold, Black people die of COVID-19 with knees on our necks. Yet, with each new day, we are like a tree planted by the rivers of water, bringing forth fruit in its season. Our leaves shall not wither, and whatever we do, we shall prosper. Let me close this evening with the big mama of the Black family. She was the modern day matriarch, full of style and grace. Yes, before there was an Amanda Gorman, there was Maya Angelou, who gave us this: a rock, a river, a tree. Host of species long since departed, marked the mastodon, the dinosaur, who left dried tokens of their sojourn here on our planet floor. Any broad alarm or their hastening doom is lost in the gloom of dust and ages. But today, the rock cries out to us clearly, forcefully, "Come, you may stand upon my back and face your distant destiny, but seek no haven in my shadow. I will give you no hiding place down here. You, created only a little lower than the angels, have crouched too long in the bruising darkness, have lain too long, face down in ignorance, your mouth spilling words, armed for slaughter. The rock cries out to us today, you may stand upon me, but do not hide your face. Across the wall of the world, a river sings a beautiful song. It says, come, rest here by my side. Each of you, a bordered country, delicate and strangely made proud, yet thrusting perpetually under siege. Your armed struggles for profit have left collars of waste upon my shore, currents of debris upon my breast. Yet today, I call you to my riverside, if you will study war no more. Come, clad in peace, and I will sing the songs the Creator gave to me when I and the tree and the rock were one. Before cynicism was bloody, sear across your brow, and when you let your voices know, even then you knew that you knew nothing. The river sang and sings on. There was a true yearning to respond to the singing river and the wise rock. So say the Asian, the Hispanic, the Jew, the African, the Native American, the Sioux, the Catholic, the Muslim, the French, the Greek, the Irish, the rabbi, the priest, the sheik, the gay, the straight, the preacher, the privileged, the homeless, the teacher. They all hear the tree speaking of the tree. They hear the first and last of every tree. Speak to humankind today. Come to me here beside the river. Plant yourself beside the river. Each of you, descendant of some passed on traveler, has been paid for. You, who gave me my first name, you, Pawnee, Apache, Seneca, you, Cherokee Nation, who rested with me, then forced on bloody feet, left me to the employment of others, desperate for gain, starving for gold. You, the Turk, the Arab, the Swede, the German, the Eskimo, the Scot. You, the Ashanti, the Yoruba, the Kru, bought, sold, stolen, arriving on the nightmare, praying for a dream. Here, root yourselves beside me. I am that tree planted by the river, which will not be moved. I, the rock. I, the river. I, the tree. I am yours. Your passages have been paid. Lift up your faces. You have a piercing need for this bright morning dawning for you. History, despite its wrenching pain, cannot be unlived. But if faced with courage, need not be lived again. Lift up your eyes upon this day breaking for you. Give birth again to the dream. Women, children, men, take it into the palms of your hands. Mold it into the shape of your most private need. Sculpt it into the image of your most public self. Lift up your hearts. Each new hour holds new chances for a new beginning. Do not be wedded forever to fear, yoked eternally to brutishness. The horizon leans forward, offering you space to place new steps of change here on the pulse of this fine day. You may have the courage to look up and out and upon me, the rock, the river, the tree, your country, your Fitchburg State University, no less to Midas than the mendicant, no less to you now than the mastodon then. Here on the pulse of this new day, you may have the grace to look up and out and into your sister's eyes and into your brother's face, your country, and say simply, very simply, with hope, good morning. The state of the Black Union is strong because the state of the Black Union is you. Whether your numbers be many or few, you are the dreamer, you are the intellect, you are the promissory note, you are not the nigger, you are the rock, you are the river, you are the tree planted by the rivers of waters, and you shall not be moved. When your burdens seem too much for you to bear, when the news of the day brings more death than life, remember the words of your ancestors and know that you are kings, you are queens, and if you must, just recall the plaintive cry of the Negro national anthem. God of our weary years, God of our silent tears, thou who has brought us thus far on the way, thou who has by thy might led us into your glorious light, keep us forever in the path we pray. Fitchburg, you are a blessing, and I am forever in your debt for the opportunity to spend some time with you this evening. I want to offer my huge thanks to Mr. Medley for this invitation and for all he is doing and has done to support and to educate students. Let's now engage in a conversation about the strength of the Black Union. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bell. If we can give him a round of applause, a virtual thumbs up, snaps, whatever your pleasure may be. Remember, remember that you can submit your questions through the chat box. You can unmute yourself and speak. And then also keep in mind that we do have a Q&A Google form that is on our website, and you may utilize that also if that would be your preference. So at this time, I'm going to turn it back over to Mr. Bell to moderate the questions, and I will provide support. Ms. Marla will provide support where needed. So at this time, we're open for questions. Well, Mr. Bell, while we see if there's any that may come in, I'm going to ask you a question. I took a few notes. Um, what is the cost by which the Black family has paid to be resilient? To be resilient is not free. So could you talk to us a little bit about the cost by which the Black family has paid?
I would argue, Mr. Medley, first and foremost, thank you for the question. The cost is more than we could ever calculate. The cost is more than we could ever imagine. The cost, however, is also embedded in our DNA. Our ancestors paid a price that we could never ever imagine. And that price that they paid long before we arrived on these shores was sufficient for us to live in the freedom of each and every new day. And how does the cost manifest itself? Let's talk about that if I could shift the question a bit. It manifests itself through stereotype threat. I'm sitting in class and I'm concerned about confirming a stereotype that exists about my group. I'm concerned that my professor may call on me to represent all Black people, not understanding or knowing that Black people are not a monolithic people. The cost comes in many cases by way of high blood pressure, obesity, the need for counseling support services that don't exist often on many of our campuses for us. So the costs are great, the costs are many, and they're also unimaginable because they come out of nowhere. Microaggressions are real. And in a day and time where a 9-year-old little girl can be handcuffed and maced, the fear of that same thing happening to my son, my daughter, my niece, my nephew, to me, is greater than any of us could ever imagine. And yet, Mr. Medley, we bear those costs without complaint. Maya Angelou says, "Write me down in your books, still I rise. No matter what you do to me, like a tree planted by the rivers of waters, I will not be moved. I will work tirelessly to be true to my spirit of reconciliation. I'll work tirelessly to even have the knowledge that my ancestors gave their life, I'll still forgive. I was promised 40 acres and a mule. Haven't seen it yet. It's not coming. Yet, I believe in the power of reconciliation, and I am not charging any capital of these, our United States of America, demanding anything because my Black mother taught me better than that. Unfortunately, we are in a period where the squeaky wheel gets the grease, and we've learned masterfully how to suffer in silence. And so the price is greater than we can ever imagine. And it's so great that we can't even articulate how great it is.
Thank you. Are there any questions from our attendees?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
It's Hank. How you doing, Carl?
Hello, Dr. Hank. How are you? I'm great. Thank you.
I am great too. I'm in my car, so I'm sorry that my camera's not on. I just, multitasking. I had to pick up Alyssa, who, as you know, you met and did the
Yeah.
rally, right? Yeah. I thank you. I just want to thank you for being here with us tonight and continuing to share your wisdom and passion for this. So I just want to acknowledge that and thank you.
Thank you.
I also had a question. As a white male, what can I do to help strengthen the Black Union? What are some things that I could do, if anything, or is it what can I do?
I'll pick on you, Hank, because we're friends. And let me just share at the outset that if you don't do it, it can't be done. You are one of the very few people that can make this happen. The state of the Black Union will be stronger when you add your voice to the conversation, when you add your ears to the plaintive cries of Black students, Black community members, and Black peoples, especially during Black History Month. You can then use your position of privilege and power to advance those initiatives that you've heard about, that resonate in your heart of hearts with you, to make certain that your students, your colleagues, your friends have a smoother path than they already have. This is not to say that you aren't already doing many of these things. I believe that you are. And there's always work to be done. Until we no longer can say in public, on TV, on radio, across this country, that had those persons who stormed the Capitol been other than white, we'd have many more deaths than 5. There's work for all of us to do. That underscores for all of us the distance, as Douglas talked about it, between whites and Blacks. We have to work effortlessly and with great effort at the same time to close that distance. It has to be an effort that we make daily. It has to be a conscious, intentional effort. Because if we don't make that effort, then we're contributing to the opposite piece. That gulf will grow. And so I would argue or encourage, Hank, conversations with close friends who are close enough to challenge you, yet encourage you forward to do the work that has to be done. Well, what does that work look like? Perhaps at Fitchburg, it looks like having more faculty of color. Now, I'm making that up because I don't know what the makeup is of your faculty. Having more administrators of color, right? Creating spaces for students where they can thrive and don't walk into spaces believing that they are less than. And this also underscores, Hank, the challenge of college administrators. Before our students get to us, they've had 18, sometimes 25 years of life outside of the academy. And we have no way of knowing what trials or tribulations they faced. Some have argued, Hank, that there is generational trauma also in the DNA of Black folks. If that's the case, how do you, one, name that you too, by the nature of your very whiteness, contributes to that generational trauma, that you acknowledge it and you are aware of it, and you're willing to partner with students, partner with faculty, partner with staff to ameliorate, to mitigate some of that trauma, to lessen the burden, to make the path smoother, right? No gimmies, no handouts, no freebies, but to make the path smoother, to remove some of the barriers that exist from admission to graduation. That's the work that you can do. 1, acknowledge it. 2, partner. And 3, be intentional and focused. And then share the good news. Go tell somebody. Tell your friends about the great work that you're doing and encourage them to do the same. Then we can all move the ball a bit further. Not sure if that answered your question, but I'm happy to talk offline about that piece some more. Absolutely, yes.
No, absolutely, Karl, and I appreciate that. Thank you so much for that insight. Thank you.
Absolutely.
I want to talk offline more about that.
Absolutely. And it's difficult work. It's difficult work, right? And I would say, too, that we need to create spaces or encourage our faculty to create spaces in the academy that allow us to have an open conversation around the stress and strain of this idea of secondary trauma. It didn't happen to me, but I have a 14-year-old daughter, and I can't imagine her screaming out, "You're hurting me. May I have a lady officer?" And then to have the officer say to this child, "You're acting like a child." And to have the 9-year-old say, "I am a child. I'm a child. Don't treat me like I'm a grown woman." And this is the challenge of our society. Because imagine that the officers who encountered this 9-year-old little girl didn't realize that she was a 9-year-old little girl. You'll recall years ago when Tamir Rice was shot, the officers arrived and shot him within seconds. Thought he was 21 years old. He's a teenager, he's a kid. So there's something happening in all of our brains as it relates to race that allows us not to see, that changes even perhaps our DNA, such that we are blind to certain facts, certain evidence that for us creates a grown woman from a 9-year-old, such that we say, "You're acting like a child." And the child has to remind us, "I am a child." So I think it's one of those where we have to engage online, offline, and everywhere in between in some very difficult conversations around our blind spots.
Mhm.
Right? Not to go on and on, but I don't see many questions here in the chat. I was hit about a year ago in my car, and I had no idea. Elizabeth, I see your hand. Give me 2 seconds. I had no idea what happened. And so once we got pulled over, I said to the gentleman, "What happened?" Right? And he said, "I was in a hurry. I was in his blind spot." And by the time he pulled into my lane, he was into my car. We all have blind spots, and we need someone to uncover those blind spots for us and allow us the opportunity to make mistakes, to attempt to get it right, and to know that in our heart of hearts, we are not working against our Black students. We're not working against the Black family, but we have to understand the Black family. We have to understand the white family. And then we can clearly understand that these two families are not the same. Our Native families have traditions and customs that our Black families don't have. And so how do we have an open conversation around our blind spots? I don't know what it means to be Native. I don't know what it means to be Black. I don't know what it means to be white. I only know my experience, and here it is. And as a result, I'm working to make these adjustments, and I could be working in the wrong direction. Elizabeth, please.
Thank you. This might sound a little funny the way that I end this, but I want to acknowledge that something that I have been learning in recent months is that one of the best things I can do is to listen and not to try to steer a conversation necessarily, but to take in and to listen. At the same time, I know that when you give a presentation or a talk or an address, and there's a question and answer time, it can feel a little a little underwhelming to not have a lot of questions. So I don't want for you to not have a question, and yet what I'm getting out of this is listening. And so what I think I want to do is ask you, what question would you like to field? Because I would like to continue listening, but I don't have a question.
Well, I appreciate your question because it allows me to think about this community. It allows me to, for a moment, say, well, if I were you, or even to talk about my own experience, which I'll do now, right? Let's have an open conversation. This is being recorded, but I want to follow that tradition of Douglas and speak truth to power. What does that mean? It means that on occasion, you have to say that even here in my role at Boston College, for the last 15 years, there has been a racial incident, and the university, for the most part, has only given lip service about the racial incident. It wasn't until the summer of 2020 that our university president even made a statement about race. And even then, it was to announce an initiative of the university that would focus on racial justice outside the university. In a context, Elizabeth, where we believe charity begins at home and spreads abroad. It's in the Bible. So I think it's important for us to really interrogate our mission. What's the mission of Fitchburg State? How do we play a part in advancing that mission? Does that mission need to be tweaked? What are our goals for all of our students? One of them is to create lifelong learners. Well, what does that mean? How does that work? And what happens when Boston College is still teaching that Christopher Columbus sailed the ocean blue and discovered America in 1492? That's a lie. That's a lie. How do we speak truth to power? Now, too often, we leave it to our students, right? Too often, we have conversations that go nowhere, but we feel better because we've had the conversation, right? This idea, Elizabeth, of generational trauma is a real thing. Now, we're shy because we can't say to students, are you suffering generational trauma? We should be able to, though, right? If we have a relationship with students, a close one, then we might get to a place where we can have those heart-to-heart conversations and ask our students, what is it that you would have me do? Right? Or engage our peers at other universities and other places, right? Because the idea here is, how do we manage a university community in a context where, and I say this in part tongue-in-cheek, but also in reality, there are good people on both sides. Now, we can't imagine, many of us, good people who identify as the alt-right, white supremacist. But those are our students. Those are our uncles. Those are our aunts. Those are our parents. And so how do we engage our students in ways that create pathways for them to have conversations with their aunts, their uncles, their friends? How do we engage our white students who want to know, rightfully so, well, when do we celebrate White History Month? When is it okay for me to wear my "It's Okay to Be White" shirt to class? When can I raise my hand and say, I believe that the election was stolen? Now, these are uncomfortable conversations. These are conversations that we don't want to have. And we have to have them, right? We have to have them. All the names that I listed made a sacrifice for this country, right? This is our country. How ironic to have J-Lo singing "This land is your land. This land is my land" from California. And many folks are like, that's a lie. This land was not made for you and me. It was only made for you. Those words ring so very true for so many of our students, so many of us, even to this day. How do we reconcile that? Well, we can't reconcile it if we can't first see it. And so I love Dr. Hank's question around, what should I be doing? What can I do? And that's a question we should all ask ourselves every day. Elizabeth, I ask myself every day, how am I advancing white supremacy? How am I advancing white supremacy? I tell my students, I'm white. From day one to now, 85% of my educators have been white. They have taught me well the white curriculum. My parents told me, you have to know your school stuff and your home stuff, right? Not all parents are engaged in that way. And so I think it's important to meet all of our students where they are, no matter where they are, and to bring them to where we need them to be as a community, right? And we don't do that by doing the BC look away. Hear no evil, see no evil. We had students over the last week in our multicultural leadership education floor be targeted. Garbage cans turned over in the hallway, door decorations torn off the doors. And the university refuses to label this action as a bias hate incident. That's a problem. And folks like me are too afraid of the power structure to say that's a problem. So what can we do? We can all engage in one another and supporting one another in safe spaces for faculty and staff, just as we engage our students to create a space for all of us to have these very difficult conversations, because we all need it, because we all come from communities and backgrounds that aren't as smart as the collective community at Fitchburg. So I would love to have someone ask the question around, how can I form one of these groups? I would love to have someone ask the question, how can I speak or learn to speak truth to power? I would love to have someone ask the question around, how do we fix it? How do we fix it? Now I'm hearing also my education coming in. Derek Bell would say, we can't fix it. Racism is permanent, right? It's never going away. So perhaps our goal should not be to have racism go away. We have to be mindful of our goals. My mom always says, plan your work, work your plan. So what can we, each and every one of us, individually and collectively, accomplish this year, this week? How do we get past celebrating Black History Month in February and celebrate it year-round? How do we get away from celebrating Native American History Month in October, Hispanic Heritage Month in October? How do we go away from months altogether and say, this is our community. These are our people. We're going to celebrate you at all times. We're not going to throw you a bone when it's your month, right? The entire campus is your bone. The entire community here is yours. We're going to affirm you by hiring folks that look like you, that talk like you, by putting forth initiatives that advance your ways of knowing, your ways of being, by highlighting you on our webpage so that you feel as though you are a part of this community. And when you have an issue, you can rest assured that we're going to address it because you are a member. In fact, it's what Baldwin said. I know this. Everyone is important. Every person is important. I don't know that the students here at BC or students at UMass Boston, where I'm a student, or at Fitchburg, or at any campus, really believe that they are part of the community. We should be mindful of those privileges that we point out without even knowing that we're pointing them out, right? There are some experiences at Fitchburg, at BC for sure, 100%, that we privilege, that we have no idea that we're privileging them, and they have nothing to do with our most vulnerable students. And we're Jesuits, right? And so how do we acknowledge that we've ignored our students? We ask them, do you feel as though you belong? Did we celebrate Black History Month in August? Nope. Probably not. I don't know if we did or didn't. It's not likely that we did because it wasn't time for that. August was move in. August was get settled. August was whatever else. And we didn't have time to think about. And so how do we have an approach that says we're going to celebrate everyone all the time? Can you imagine at Fitchburg if your supervisor greeted you every day with, Elizabeth, I'm picking on you because you're the last person to ask a question. Sorry. Elizabeth, thank you for the work that you do. And every day, not a day went by where your supervisor or the president or someone at Fitchburg told you thanks. Would you walk a little lighter? Would you feel like, wow, I'm really appreciated here? Would you work that particular day for free, although you want to get paid at some point, right? And so it's one of those things where how do we create an environment of care? We can do this, right? If we are intentional. It has to be embedded in our DNA as an institution. How do we give ourselves a COVID-19 shot that will help us to eradicate or work to eradicate systemic racism? Well, we mentioned this in our summer conversation. How do we interrogate the syllabus? Interrogate the policies and procedures? Interrogate our hiring practices? And so there's a lot that we can do. The question really for me is, what's keeping us from it? Let me answer that. It's fear. No one else is doing it. Think about this in COVID-19 terms. I would imagine that soon, if not already, Fitchburg State will decide that they are not going to have an in-person commencement. Are we having commencement? We haven't decided yet. Who wants to be the first university to have an in-person commencement with thousands of people on campus, wearing masks or not? No one. No one wants to do that, right? Why? Because we're afraid. The consequences. And here it is. Here is the strength. Harriet Tubman was a slave, but she ran the Underground Railroad. Talk about afraid, right? Strength is in the DNA of Black folks. And so I'm almost on the fence where I would say to my Black brothers and sisters, we can't be afraid. Karl, you can't be afraid to speak truth to power. Frederick Douglass did. He is your great, 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 great uncle, and you can do it too. But we don't always gravitate towards something inside so strong. We more often gravitate to the fear that we've been taught. And that fear drives us. And so I would encourage us all on this call tonight to not give in to the fear. Now, yes, easier said than done, right? But it takes practice. Practice doesn't make perfect, it makes better. So tomorrow, we're going to do that thing that we knew we should have done all along. and we're not going to look back, right? We're going to think about it. How might this affect the least of these, right? What partnerships can we create in the community so that the Fitchburg community understands that the university is also part of the community? And we can educate some of those folks so that when our students go into the community, they're not catching hell, as my dad would say, in the community. They can also live and exist and breathe in Fitchburg without the fear of the cops pulling them over and harassing them. So we have work to do as leaders of the community. And that work is very difficult to do, right? Not suggesting that it's easy, but as I mentioned before, in the summer months, Fitchburg came together and had a critical conversation on race. I argued then, I've studied this a little bit, very few campuses did that. So now how do we celebrate? How do we make ourselves that campus in Massachusetts that's going to celebrate all of our students year round? We're not going to wait for Black History Month to invite 85 Black speakers. Or Native American History Month to acknowledge the fact that we stole this land. That's difficult to do. But it's true, right? In my history, right, or in my culture, we have this thing we say, tell the truth and shame the devil, right? Speak truth to power. If we stole this land, should we give it back? Because at some point, our land acknowledgement rings hollow. I don't know. I'm just tossing it out there. These are just conversation pieces, right? And so how do we do the work that our country, perhaps even our state, will never do, right? Do we have a Native American center on our campus that's open to the Native peoples from the community? Free, come in, right? As a nod to, yes, this land is our land. This land is not your land from California to the New York Islands. We stole it all, and we'll give you this little piece so that we can begin repairing relations. And before long, those Native American students who live in the backyard, committed never ever to come to Fitchburg State, they've been coming there since they were 5 now. Because Fitchburg had a Native American center that they could go to at no cost. Free paper. Now, I don't know if the state will allow that. I don't know how these things work. I'm just dreaming. And Elizabeth, this is the last time I'll pick on you. That's what you can do. Dream. Dream. Can we secure a $50 million donation from someone? Jeff Bezos is now into philanthropy. He has 50 million. Do we have students who work for Amazon, who have a relationship with him, that can then ask him to give money for Fitchburg State? I don't know. Who do we know? Or are we that little campus on the hill and we just have to get what we get? I don't know, right? But there's so many things that we could dream about, right? Because there's a dreamer within us. Harriet Tubman told us. MLK, back in the 60s, I have a dream that one day, and that day still hasn't come. All right, I rambled on for too long, so forgive me.
Thank
Is
you.
there another question or comment, please? Anyone?
Mr. Bell, while we wait to see if there is another question, during your delivery of your presentation, I felt like at times I was at my grandmother's house, then I went to the schoolhouse, and then I transitioned to the church house. Could you speak a little bit in regards to some of the spiritual undertones that was part of your delivery? Because for some, those spiritual undertones may have been a little uncomfortable.
Mhm.
And so I think that maybe it would be good to just maybe speak to how you look at the Black family, the Black union, spirituality, and why was that important for you to do this evening?
We are who we are. We are who we are. And so the piece that I did not mention in any of this is I'm the baby kid of a Baptist preacher. I work at a Jesuit Catholic institution. And so I spend my days here at BC trying to find God in all things. From the day that I was born until now, I've been in the church. And although religion, I believe, was used as a way to control the slaves, Black people, the Black family, the Black church has been critically important in the upbringing of the Black family, right? And so you have those deacons, those preachers, those pastors, those mothers. As I mentioned in my introduction, God has brought us a long way, over high mountains and valleys so low. For me, my faith is at the core of who I am. And so, and I believe, there probably isn't wide agreement here, I believe that the Black church, Black leaders, many of them, have come out of the Black church. And so you have the Black church at the forefront of the civil rights movement. You have the Black church being there as a place of a refueling station, if you will. So folks are going every week, checking into church, trying to understand how to get through the hell of a week that's upcoming. And the same is happening now for our students, many of them, I would imagine. Right? And so for me, Mr. Medley, it was important to be true to who I am. And so our remarks basically went through history, pulling out those icons, our ancestors, who gave everything. And we don't even know their names. We don't know the name of the first woman to get a PhD. And we're in education. Or the first man to get, we might probably know that one, the first man to get a PhD from Harvard. And if we don't know, our students don't know. So my white education paralyzes my non-white students when they're talking to me because I'm limited in what I can offer them. I'm limited in my resources. I don't know, and so I can't tell them. And so it was important to me to at least call the names, place those names on the record, so someone can go back and say, he was talking awfully fast, but it sounded as though he said Madam C.J. Walker, the first Black billionaire, long before Oprah, right? And these stories have been placed on the shelf. The Black family, there was a time in the Black family where oral history was life. You sat on the lap of your grandparents and they told you stories of their childhood. This is before TV. TV came and ruined all of that. And now you have parents barely talking to their children about when they were children. And so I like to think of myself as an old school presenter, one that goes back and looks at the periods of history where things were much worse than they could ever be now. This conversation isn't taking place in 1963. We're still segregated. That was what? Not even 60 years ago. And this is the piece that we don't realize. We don't realize that we're really new to all of this. It feels like we've been doing it forever, but this is really new. 400 years is a short period of time. But can you imagine that? 400 years a slave? 400 years still fighting some of the same battles that your ancestors fought? And perhaps not the same, but similar. Because as society changes, the battles also change. And so what do we need to do? We need to bring back some of those traditions. We need to ask students, talk to me please about your experiences with education. How do you learn best? What conditions need to be set in order for you to be free to be you on this campus? All of our students, right? So how many students do you encounter today even wearing MAGA hats? Or have your MAGA hat wearing students been silenced at Fitchburg State? I don't know. We have a duty, you have a duty to support all of your students. And so you almost have to be open to being all things to all people. And so in being that, I would encourage transparency. My cards are on the table. I don't have a hidden agenda. I'm going to support you. I'm going to support you. Yes, I'm not Black. Yes, I'm Black. And just because I'm Black doesn't mean that I'm going to support Black students more than non-Black students. That's probably a fact, but it doesn't mean that. Doesn't have to mean that, right? Because what do we do when we go to conferences? NASPA is coming up, right? We'll be texting, ACPA is coming up. We'll be texting our friends. Are you going to ACPA? I'll look for you. It's all virtual, right? And so instead of reaching out to the stranger next to us on the panel, we're reaching out to our friends, right? Oh, this talk is really good. That's who we are as a people. And so how do we create more connections across the campus so every student feels comfortable in our office, or just as comfortable in the president's office than in Mr. Medley's office, or in Dr. Hank's office, or Dr. Laura's office? That has to be our mandate, creating spaces and time and opportunities for students to engage in tough conversations with people that they can trust. Nothing better than that. If you can befriend a student, if a student can trust you, they will tell you things that you never ever imagined hearing. And when you hear it, you'll know, wow, that's trust. I had the great fortune this week, and we all love talking about our students. I'll just ramble. But you never know whose life you touched. You never know. You never know. One of my students, we were fairly close, I guess, wrote this week saying, hey, KB, I'm defending my dissertation in March, and I wanted you to see my acknowledgement section. And what name appeared? My name. What an honor for a first-generation kid, right? To have been blessed to work at Boston College and to have that kind of testimony from a Yale PhD, no less, right? And so how do we engage our students in a way that's meaningful for them and for us, and to allow ourselves to be as changed by our students as we believe we change them? That's the question. Are we open to that? Or are we so fully formed that we're all set? I think we're open to that. I think we have to be open to that. And so for me, I wear my emotions, I wear my Baptist background, my PK background on my sleeve. I am unabashedly the baby kid of my mom and dad. And my parents raised me that I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. That's my background. Not going to run away from it, right? Now, this is being recorded. I'm at BC. I want to mention that I'm not at Fitchburg, so that whole separation of church and state thing, I get that, right? But we have to be who we are, right? And we have to at least be able to say to our students, I don't know your experience exactly, but here's a time where I was afraid to talk to my professor outside of class. Here's a time where I was afraid to speak up. So I really appreciate the fact that you've taken this extraordinary step of speaking up, of saying to our community, you want us to be better. Baldwin talks about, I criticize America because I love her so much. I don't criticize her because I hate her. This is my country. Now, of course, then he left the States, but this is my country. And it's only because this is my country that I feel as though I have the right to criticize. Right? Now, there's imbalance in our country. And so you have patriots storming the Capitol and hurting people and doing so freely. And you have thousands of others, white, black, and otherwise, at home saying, now, if those folks were not white, we'd have massive casualties on our hands. So I think that's a conversation that we have to have with our students. You know, are students receiving from us grades that are racialized? Are non-white students receiving lower grades than white students? Is it our experience that non-white students need more support? How do we advance equity at Fitchburg State, right? Not equality, right? So it's Sojourner Truth. If I have a pint and you have a quart, won't you give me some? The reality is no. The reality is no. And I think we have to be open to confronting that reality. We have to be open to saying to students, if you have water, you don't need water. So we're going to provide water for those students that need it. We're not going to give you extra water because you don't need water. Let me close with this thought. This goes back, so I'm aging myself a bit. But if you think back to Hurricane Katrina and the media coverage of Hurricane Katrina, there are two narratives that the media pushed around that tragedy. The narrative of whites finding food and the narrative of blacks stealing food and looting. Same citizens taking the same extraordinary measures to provide for their families where they had none. But the media, the narrative, this country, drastically different. Our work, especially as it relates to Black history, is to close that gap. Our work, especially as it relates to Black History Month, is to alert our students of their power, to tell our students that they are powerful beyond measure and that there's nothing that they can't do. Again, imagine every day you see a student and you say to them, have I told you today how powerful you are? Have I told you today that there's nothing that you can't do? And sadly, the reality is our students don't believe us. They don't believe that they are powerful beyond measure. And that's why they have us. They have us to encourage them. They have us to educate them. They have us to prepare them for the hard lives that they're going to face when they leave the comfort of Fitchburg State, right? It's a tough life out there. And we fail our students when and if we don't tell them the truth. So we have to acknowledge our blind spots. We have to acknowledge our shortcomings. We have to acknowledge the ways in which we advanced white supremacy. And then we have to take steps to correct our mistakes. My dad would say all the time, son, to err is human. You can make a mistake. Just don't make the same mistake over and over and over and over again, right? Demonstrate that you've learned from your mistakes, right? That's the call, that's the charge, right? Go tell somebody about the beauty and the strength of the Black family. The state of the Black Union, it's always been strong, no matter what. There's no other option. Think about it. What? 400 years of slavery, and you're still here? You're still smiling? You still find your way out of your bed and to your job? Come on now. That's to be celebrated. That's to be excited about. And as difficult as it is, I'm excited. And you should be too. Because whether you know it or not, you've contributed to the strength of the Black family. And don't be shy about that, right? Hire those Black students in your offices. Hire them to be your TAs and tell them, yep, I am contributing to your excellence. I already know that you're excellent anyway. I'm just adding a little bit more extra excellence, right? Tell your students that they're excellent. Tell them every day, every time you see them. And when you forget, go back and tell them, oh, I forgot to tell you yesterday that you're excellent, and you're excellent. And before long, you're going to have some excellent students. They're going to believe that they're excellent. And they will love Fitchburg State so much that when they get that good paying job that every Black mother wants their baby to have, they're going to give back to Fitchburg State. And let me just end by saying to all of you, the task before you is not greater than the power within you. You just don't know it. You just don't know it. There's nothing you can't do. There's no way that you can't support your students because they need you to support them in all ways. And they always need you to do it. And so that's your task. That's your job. Not whatever is on that piece of paper that says job description at the top. That's not your job. That describes your job. It's your job to figure out what your actual job is. And then to move forward in community with others at Fitchburg State to do it.
Thank you, Mr. Bell. Once again, let's give him a round of applause. We appreciate those words of wisdom, those moments of reflection, and the inspiration to move forward. I would like to once again invite everyone to please continue to be with us as we continue our programming series. Next week, we will start on Tuesday, continuing our national theme that we have adopted, the Black family, representation, identity, and diversity. So at this time, we will be signing off, but remember that we will be returning. Thank you, Fitchburg State. Thank you, community members. We have a lot of work to do, and I know that we can do it together. Have a great evening.